What to look at today? It goes without saying, the last couple of years has been brutal, and I'm sure many of you have felt at times on my knees and feeling like I'm discovering how fragile I am, how fragile the world can be, how difficult life can be, and yet in the midst of all of that over the last couple of years, I have felt like I have been seeing Jesus afresh. It feels to me at times like seeing him for the first time and just discovering in a whole new way how amazing he is and how rich and wonderful and magnificent the gospel is. And one of the things, Mike mentioned Gentle and Lowly, that's been part of that journey. We've read a whole bunch of books. We'll mention some more as we go. Just to have the time to, and for me, frankly, I've been so desperate. There's been nowhere else to go. I've come to him, and seen him again. And one of the things that I discovered a little while ago now was that there are these two big images. There's obviously multiple images, but there are two big ones that the Bible gives us for our relationship with God. And the first is that he's our father and we are his daughters and his sons. We're his kids. And naturally, I think I'm probably not the only one, we gravitate towards that image. We love that image of him as a father. Even if we struggle with it because of our own baggage and our own relationships with our parents, we love that image and we're drawn to it. But the second image is one that certainly I've never really considered seriously, but it's there in the scripture, and it's one that instinctively we might find a little more difficult to comprehend. And it's this image that we have of Jesus as the bridegroom. Jesus as our husband and as it were, the lover of our souls. And we, his church, as his bride. And that image, not just for the blokes, but I think certainly in a big way for blokes, is something that it's just instinctively maybe we react against that. And it can seem or it can feel a little like touchy-feely Christianity. A little sloppy, a little sentimental to be talking about Jesus as the bridegroom. It can feel irreverent even to speak of the holy God in this way. And if you're here and you've never been to anything at Naturally Supernatural, never been to anything at Soul Survivor, and you've walked into a world of orgasmatrons and the snip, and now we're talking, it's like you might be thinking if we're starting to talk about Jesus as the lover of our souls, I thought these guys were weird, and now I know for sure. But I've been coming back to it and looking at it, and whereas I had thought for a long time, this is not a major theme in the Bible. This is like half a verse somewhere, and sometimes people take that, and blow it out of proportion. I've been discovering this is everywhere. And I feel a little like, when someone shows you one of those magic pictures, those optical illusions, and it's like a rabbit, but it's also a picture of an old lady. Do you know what I mean? And when you look at it at first, all you can see is the first one, the rabbit, and there's no old lady there. And then they explain to you, here's the chin, here's the nose, here's the eyes. And then that's all you can see is the old lady. I feel a little like that, whereas I thought this was just half a verse somewhere buried in the back of the Bible. Now I was just seeing it all over the place. This is a massive theme. Jesus as the bridegroom and us, the church, as his bride. And just a few places, just briefly, that we see it. One is the Old Testament. One of the main pictures of God's relationship with his people is of a marriage. And there are so many places where that occurs. In Isaiah 54 verse 5, it says, "For your maker is your husband." Your maker is your husband. And sadly, because Israel, mainly messed things up, a lot of the imagery is of God as a faithful husband and Israel as an adulterous wife. And idolatry, which is the main sin in the Old Testament, is described in terms of adultery. It's like they're having an affair. So we see it throughout the Old Testament. And then when Jesus arrives, he is introduced to us by John the Baptist in John's Gospel as the bridegroom, and John's the usher. The bridegroom is here. Jesus talks about himself with this language. So he says in Matthew chapter 9, verse 19, he says, I'm the bridegroom. Why aren't your disciples fasting and stuff like that, like John says. But he says, because the bridegroom's here. You don't do that when the bridegroom is here. And then he uses parables to paint this picture for us. So he talks about wedding banquets, a king preparing a wedding banquet for his son, or 10 virgins who are waiting for the bridegroom to arrive. He uses that imagery to describe what's happening when the kingdom of God comes. And we're told that everything that's happening now is in preparation for a wedding that we're awaiting in the future. This is all the wedding preparation for the picture that we're given in the book of Revelation, which describes the future to us. And in that, Revelation chapter 19, verse 7, it says, let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory. For the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. We're the bride. Blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. So the whole of history is building up to a wedding where we're going to marry the bride. And then Paul uses this language as well in his letters. There's too many to give you loads of examples, but Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31, he says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. So, strange as it seems, the picture of a bridegroom and his bride, a husband and wife, two lovers who are becoming one flesh, is for us a foundational picture of our relationship with Jesus. And so if we can at the start just acknowledge it's a bit weird and then park the strangeness of it over here and then really just engage with it as a picture for us, then what I've found as I've looked at this is there is some incredible truth in this image. There is some glorious revelation, I think, that God wants to communicate to us through this picture. And one of the best places to find this picture is in the book called The Song of Songs, which if you've never read that, it's in the Old Testament. You find it just before Isaiah. And The Song of Songs is really a love story. So think of the great romances of our day. Romeo and Juliet, Posh and Bex, Ross and Rachel. I don't know what generation you're from. Justin and Haley, Mike and a kebab. These romances, they pale into insignificance in comparison to the one that you meet in the book of the Song of Songs. It's really a poem that tells a love story between a king and his maiden. And on one level, it's a celebration of human love, and there's lots we can learn from it for our own relationships. But it's also been read for centuries, rightly so, as a picture of the relationship between Christ, who is the king, in the poem, and us, we his church, who are the maiden. And so just to introduce you to it, so within a few verses, what we can see at the start of the Song of Songs is that the maiden desires the king. It speaks of our desire for God. And so the way that it's phrased is it says, chapter 1, starting in verse 2, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. For your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the young women love you. Take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his bedchamber. And, you read that. This is the first few verses of this poem, and you think, my word, that escalated quickly. All right, it starts with, let him kiss me with the kisses of my mouth, his mouth. And then by verse 4, she's like, I want him to take me to bed, quick, right? Let us hurry. Let's get to the bedchamber now. And this is her desire of him. It speaks of our desire of God. And this is what Mike was talking about yesterday afternoon, our first session, which is, it is about desire. It is about a love affair. There's so many examples he gave. I mean, the Psalms being just one of many. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul yearns for you. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 anywhere else. Jesus tells us the most important commandment, our number one priority. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. And I read that and I connect with this maiden and her desire for God. Yes, we're not living there some of the time, sometimes a lot of the time, but we know that's what it was meant to be. We understand that this was always meant to be more than just a satisfactory working relationship. It was meant to be a love affair. So when I'm reading the Song of Songs, I'm like, yeah, the maiden desires the king. That's our desire for God. Okay. But as I've meditated on it, what has really, if I'm honest, blown my mind has not been the way that the maiden, us, speaks about her desire for the king, God. Rather, it's been when the king, God, speaks of his desire for the maiden, us. It's what the king says about the maiden, the way that he speaks from the core of who he is about how much he desires her. And this is relevant for all of us. I remember years ago, just after I moved to Watford, I was cycling home one night about 10:30, and there was this lad just sitting on a wall near where I lived, and he was just crying. 15 years old he looked. And that didn't happen very much around there, so I just went over to him and just said, "How you doing?" And he wasn't doing great. And we ended up chatting, and he ended up telling me a bit of his story. And he just opened up to me. I was a total stranger. But he opened up, he was that desperate. And he said his story was that he'd never known his dad and that his mum had died a couple of years before. That both his older brothers were in jail. That he was being looked after by a social worker who didn't want to know. And that his girlfriend who lived down the road had just dumped him. And I didn't know what to say to him. But what I remember is what he kept saying to me over and over is he said, "I just want to know that someone loves me. I just want to know that someone loves me." And that's an example of somebody who's right at the end of themselves. And we hide it better, many of us. But the reality is that cry from the moment we're born is in the heart of every human being, which is that we just want to know that someone loves us. And the astonishing truth that we have as his followers is that when we come to know God, we have come to know a God who is love. It is his nature. He is love, like an ocean without shore and without bottom. That's who we've come to know. And yet, how many of us, I hope I'm not the only one, I don't think I am, doubt his love? How many of us, we question it and we live in it and enjoy it some of the time, but at other moments, it feels to us to be distant from us. And I remember one of my memories from deepest, darkest lockdown was, I think it was January last year, which was definitely the low point for us. And Beth and I were sitting there in our house, having finally got our 4 kids into bed, and we were just knackered, and I was exhausted and stressed and, all the other stuff. And you know how when you're tired, someone can say something, and they say something and you hear something different? And I remember Beth turned to me and she just said, as the two of us sat there in front of the fire, she just said, I'm really missing my friends. That's what she said. Completely valid. My wife is a raging extrovert and she'd been trapped in a house just with me and the kids. So she said, I'm really missing my friends. But what I heard was, I'm really sick of seeing you. And I reacted to that, right? And we ended up having this argument, and it was like, and I realized, reflecting on it, oh God, she was absolutely fine to say that, but my baggage, all of my insecurities, all the pressure I was under in that moment meant that she said one thing and I heard something else. We do that with each other. Do you think we do it with him? Is it possible that he says one thing to us, and because of our stuff, because of our, what we're under in a particular low moment, that we just hear something different? So he might say to us, I love you without condition. And what we hear is, I love you, but. He says, I forgive you completely. And what we hear is, I forgive you, except. I'm always with you is what he says to us. And what we hear is, I'm always with you apart from. He says one thing and then we filter and it becomes something else. And, we've come to know a God he is love, and yet we find ourselves still insecure in his love. And if you've ever found yourself feeling insecure in the love of the God that we follow, might I suggest reading the Song of Songs? and reading it and recognizing the fact that we are the maiden and he is the king, and just allowing the words of the king to wash over us, allowing the way the king feels towards the maiden to just sink into us. And as we do, it then becomes very hard to question his love. So just to pull a few things out about that are kind of examples of how the king feels towards the maiden. Now, bear in mind, this is love poetry from thousands of years ago. And so some of the images are a little dated. They wouldn't have been included in Adele's latest album, let's put it like that, right? But one of the things that they say, the king says to the maiden, this is in chapter 2, verse 14. He says this, the king talking to the maiden, "My dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the hiding places on the mountainside, show me your face. Let me hear your voice. For your voice is sweet and your face is lovely." So the image of that is kind of like, imagine a boyfriend who's head over heels for his new girlfriend. You know, and they're sitting on the sofa one day and she's just on her phone looking at Instagram, right? And he turns to her and he says, "My dove, my love, look up from your phone. Look at me," right? And she just does that and she says, "What do you want?" And he says, "I just want to see your face. I just love it." And she's like, "Why?" "It's just so attractive to me." And then a little later on, they're not together anymore, and he texts her, "Can you call me?" So she rings him. "Hi, how you doing? What do you want?" "I just want to hear your voice. Can you just talk to me?" "About what?" "I was with you 5 minutes ago." "Just about anything. Just talk to me about anything." "Why?" "Because I love the sound of your voice. I love it when you talk to me. Your voice is lovely to me. Your voice is sweet to me." That image, if you can believe it, about a boy feeling about a girl in that way, about a man feeling about a woman in that way, that image is the image that's used to describe in this moment how Jesus feels towards us. Really? He wants me to show him my face? My voice is sweet to him? Really? Yes. Really. And when the penny begins to drop on this one, it changes so much, because then prayer goes from, "Oh my word, I've got to pray. It's one of those things that I should do and I know I'm not very good at," to instead, "I'm going to show him my face." He's drawn to it. Worship goes from, "Oh, we've got to worship because again we feel like we should," to, my voice is sweet to him. He loves it. He desires it. There's another moment where the maiden describes how the king, her lover, is coming towards her. This is how she puts it. This is in chapter 2, verse 8. She says, "Listen, my beloved, look, he comes leaping across the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, peering in through the lattice. My beloved spoke and said to me, 'Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me.'" So the image that she uses to describe him is of a gazelle. Gentlemen, I don't know what look you are going for right now, but in those days, the gazelle was the look. Women would wander the streets of Jerusalem. They would turn to each other and they say, "That guy, he's a real gazelle." It was like, that was the vibe, right? But I don't know what comes to your head when you think gazelle, but if you've ever seen a David Attenborough program, they all seem to have gazelles in, and they're kind of leaping around, right? And it's like, what comes to my head when I remember what I've seen on David Attenborough is energy, grace, fluidity, speed. That's how she's describing him. She's saying, "My lover, he's coming towards me, and he's leaping and he's bounding and he's racing and he's running, and it's effortless and there's energy involved and there's desire there." When we think about how God approaches us, what do we think he does? What image comes into your mind? Because sometimes I think he's interested, but other times, because of my insecurity, because of my filters and my baggage, I think he's hesitant. He's reluctant. "Oh, it's you again, Andy. I haven't seen you for a while. Fancy you showing up." And that's not the image that we're given here. It's of a gazelle. Think of the prodigal. Think of the father and the way that he runs. He sees his son and he runs towards him. That's the picture. God runs towards us. And I hear that, And I think part of me gets it, and there's another part of me that thinks, do you know what? I struggle to believe that. I struggle to absorb it. Like I can tick the box next to the theory, but I really struggle to get it in my heart. And I wonder if some of the reason we find it hard is because we think of our relationship with God in the way that human relationships, certainly human romantic relationships, tend to work. And the way that ours tend to work is we think, because that's usually how it goes, that if somebody's going to be drawn to us, that we need to become attractive, right? If I can be attractive, they'll be drawn to me. And that's how we do dating. And most dating online tends to happen these days online. And the way that online profiles work is, of course, you think, okay, I've got to have a dating profile. What shall I do? I shall find the best picture that has ever been taken of me in my life, right? That is my profile. This is what I look like every day. And then we will spend hours coming up with a carefully crafted little bio that's kind of a little bit funny, but also very intelligent and, profound at the same time. And then we'll, if we eventually manage to hook one, then we'll go on a date. When you go on a date, you don't wear your second best outfit. You wear the best outfit you have. You tell your 5 funny jokes. You recount your 4 hilarious stories. The only funny things that have happened to you in your life. Like you bring it out. You put it all out there. I've got to be attractive. And the hope is, if we make ourselves attractive enough, they'll come back for a second date. And the real goal is if we can be attractive enough that when they find out what we're actually like, ultimately, as they weigh it up, they'll decide we're worth the pain. That the balance will just about be tipped in our favor, and they'll decide that they're going to stick around. That's how our relationships on a human level so often work, and we think that's how it works with him. We can think that we have to be attractive for him to be drawn to us. And then we can think, okay, now he's drawn, I've got to be on my best behavior if he's going to stay. And then because so often we struggle, and particularly when we're going through everything we've been through in the last couple of years, the cracks have shown and we have found it tough and we've let ourselves down and we feel at points that we've let him down too, then it becomes much harder to believe that he's drawn to us, that he's attracted to us. Again, imagine a couple, they've been going out for a few weeks, and then he just happens to be in the area. So he calls her up to drop by as a surprise. Hey, just so happens I'm around the corner. I'll come and knock on your door in a few minutes. Now, what any person in that situation would do, I think, if you've just been starting dating someone, you'd be like, great, see you in a minute, put the phone down. And then I have to sort my life out, right? He's going to come and see everything. So you quickly hide the dirty dishes in the cupboard and you hide the laundry over here and you get rid of the takeaway box. Maybe you get a Bible out and just put it open on the table. Oh, you caught me in my study. But you try and make your life look like somehow it's together so that when he comes knocking on the door, peering through the window, looking through the lattice, it looks like your life is together, right? And we bring that into our relationship with God. And so we think he's coming near. Oh my word, we better sort our lives out. Let's hide the sin over here. Let's put these bad attitudes down there. Let's tuck this over here. Maybe let's get the Bible out and pretend we've been reading it more regularly than we have. And then when he comes and he looks into my life, when he peers through the window and round the wall, then he'll see that I'm kind of together and then he'll stay. And that's how we do relationship with him. And if we do that, then what has happened is we have missed, and this has been my life for years, we have missed the heart of the gospel completely. I've got to get my mess sorted so that he'll be drawn to me. I mean, do we understand what the cross is? I know for me I do and I don't. The cross is not I'm going to give my life for you. Die for you, die for your sin and selfishness, and then after a few weeks think, what was I thinking? They're a lot worse than I expected. I regret making that sacrifice now. That's not how it works. Before we were even conceived, he knew how sinful we would be. He's not surprised by the worst aspects of our personality. He knows our houses are messy. He understands that our minds are messy too, that they're broken and they don't work in the way that they should. He knows that our souls are corrupted and messy as well at their worst. He understands that we have bad attitudes. Those cracks that appeared in the last 2 years were not a surprise to him. He already knew those flaws were there, even if they surprised us. This hasn't caught him off guard. All of my dirt and all of my mess and all of my mistakes, those things that I feel so guilty about and so ashamed of. This isn't news to this God. It's not news to the God who loves us. He saw all of that, and like a gazelle bounding over the hills, like a father running, heedless of his own dignity, towards a son who's rejected him and messed his own life up, like Jesus Christ leaving the throne of glory in heaven and coming to the cradle of the dirt and ultimately the cradle of the grave. He runs towards us because, here's the punch, he desires us. He desires us. He longs for us. Like one of the pictures that's been used to describe the gospel for a long time now is a picture of a marriage. And it's like the person said, imagine a king who's got it all, wealth, power, got everything. He can marry anyone he wants. And yet he falls in love with a woman who's made a mess of her life. She's made bad decisions, bad choices. She's racked up a whole load of debt. But he falls for her. And so they get married. And on the wedding day, what happens? What happens is they make the vows that any couple make. And so he says to her, all that I have, I give to you. All my wealth, all my riches, all my power, I give to you. And she says the same thing back. All I have, I give to you. All my debt, all the mess, all the mistakes, the consequences and results, I give it all to you. That's how it works. He gives us his beauty, his perfection, his righteousness. We give him our mess. That's the great exchange of the gospel. And I think maybe for a little while I've understood that. But here's the bit that's really hit me between the eyes. After the wedding vows are made, the king is thinking, yes, I got her. That's what he's thinking. He's not thinking, I married you and, there's a lot of baggage here and this cost me a lot, but all right. He's thinking, I got her. He's thinking, I'm going to throw a party because of you. We're going to have an absolute blast now so I can celebrate the fact that I got you. And that's the message. He desires us so much. And it's not that he ignores our sin. He despises it. Sin sent Jesus to the cross. It's just that that's how great his love for us, that he would go through everything he goes through. The cross, the grave, and at the end of it, he would get us and he would think, wow, you're worth that. And my question as I sort of think about this is, how is that possible? And I remember like a friend of ours, he tells a story about his little girl who, her favorite toy is like a china doll, like a porcelain doll. And which is a weird favorite toy for a girl to have because it's so fragile. But he says they would keep it on the mantelpiece and, once a day they would take it off the mantelpiece. She would play with it for a bit, then they put it back on the mantelpiece again. And there was a particular day where daddy and daughter were having a pillow fight. And Ant says, the dad said that he got like a bit too enthusiastic, and there was one point where he pulled his pillow back, really fast so he could give his little girl a proper whack. And when he pulled the pillow back, he accidentally knocked this doll and it started to shake on the mantelpiece. And the way that he describes it is it's almost like it went into slow motion at that point, and the two of them just went, no, as they tried to catch it, but they didn't, and it smashed on the floor. And the moment it smashed, she just pointed and started crying. And he just panicked and he said, don't worry, darling, don't worry. I've got a credit card. I'll buy you another one. And she said, but I don't want another one. I want that one. And she points to all these broken pieces. And so he gets the super glue out and he scooped up all the pieces. He went into the kitchen and he spent a couple of hours just gluing all these bits back together. And he said that when he did it, it didn't look quite right. It was like all the right pieces in all the wrong places. But he took it back in anyway and he said, I'm so sorry, darling. Here she is, she's broken. And the little girl said, you know what, I want her. And he said, but darling, look at her. Look how broken she is. And then the girl responded and she said, just because she's broken doesn't mean I can't love her. And we see ourselves, don't we, in our mess and our brokenness, and we think, but I'm broken. And the truth is, we are. We're in a process of being redeemed, but we are. And his response is, just because you're broken, it doesn't mean I don't love you, I don't desire you, that you're not precious to me. But what's your goal in this? What's your aim, God? You. And as I read it, that's the question I'm asking, is what's the aim of, the king in this moment? And you read the Song of Songs, as they get towards the bedchamber, there are all these bits where you're thinking, is he saying what I think he's saying? Is she saying what I think she's saying? And the answer is yes. I remember when Mike was, he talks about when he became a Christian and he just read through the Bible for the first time. And he got to Song of Songs and he was like, what the heck is this about? Is this what I think it is? Somebody has spiked my Bible. They get towards the bedchamber and there's this, closeness and caressing and all of that stuff. What's it working towards? What's the goal? The goal is intimacy. That's where it's headed, intimacy. And just to come back to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31, it says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. Paul, what he's doing is he's taking this kind of picture of intimacy, the most profound intimacy that can exist between a couple in marriage, and he's saying, effectively, there is an even greater intimacy than the oneness of flesh between human beings. And it's the oneness of spirit that can exist between us and Jesus, our maker. And his goal is never that we would just do things for him, although we work with him in, building his kingdom. His goal was always closeness with us. It was always relationship with him. And the implications, if we can get this, are so far-reaching. There's a moment where the maiden, she says in verse 10 of chapter 7, I belong to my beloved, and his desire is for me. I've thought so many times in the last little while, if I could just hold that truth, how different would my prayer life be? How different would it be when I'm working with him and for him to know as I wake up in the morning with complete confidence, I belong to my beloved and his desire is for me. And to finish, a question. What is the practical application of this? There's so many things we could say. It's the word and the spirit that make it real. Paul prays for the Ephesians that they'd have the spirit of wisdom and revelation, that they might know him better. It's a journey of revelation we go on, but in terms of what the practical application is, it's basically that we might enjoy this, that we might enjoy him. And imagine you won a holiday to the Caribbean, first class, 5-star hotel. We arrive. We unpack the suitcase, we go out onto the balcony, we gaze up at that ball of fire we haven't seen for about 2 years and realize it still exists. And then we ask ourselves the question, what is the practical application of this holiday? We don't do that, do we? We go outside and we just think, I am going to soak in this sun until I am pink as a lobster. I am going to eat the food, I am going to swim in the pool, I am just going to soak this up. I'm going to enjoy it. What is the practical application of this? It's to enjoy it. It's to understand this truth. This is how he feels about you. And all these commands that we have to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, they are but invitations to respond to his love that loved us first. To a God who loves us, strange as it seems to us, with all of his heart, all of his soul, all of his mind, and all of his strength. This is how he feels about us. I belong to my beloved, and his desire is for me. Amen? Amen.